Hello and welcome to Calibre Conversations, our online book festival where we chat to a range of authors in the hope of introducing you to books to add to your reading list and get you enjoying more books in National Year of Reading. My name is Emma and I'm delighted to be joined by award-winning author Simon James Green, who writes books for children of all ages, including the fabulous Llama Glamarama, Sleepover Takeover, Boy Like Me, Noah Can't Even, and Finn Jones Was Here. His books are a testament to the importance of friendship and being your own true self. So first of all, a big hello and welcome to you, Simon.
Hello, Emma. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, no, thanks so much for joining us. Now, I'm going to start by easing you in very gently with a few questions just to get to know you a little bit better. And that's just before we start sort of chatting about your books and writing. So first of all, diving straight in, what song gets you up on the dance floor, or if not on the dance floor, makes you jig around your room when no one is watching?
Yeah. Well, my taste in music is quite eclectic, Emma, but I am a really big fan and have a real weak spot for 80s power ballads in particular. So a little bit of Bonnie Tyler, Total Eclipse of the Heart, something like that. Meatloaf, maybe, that sort of thing. And I do also really enjoy a little bit of 90s music, a little bit of Britpop. So we're talking things like Blur, Pulp, Oasis, that kind of vibe as well. I really enjoy as well. So basically kind of music from my youth is what would really appeal.
Oh, good stuff. I'm coming to your party. That's exactly my sort of... and then just what... So if you had a superhero power, what would you have and why?
Oh, I would want invisibility. I think that, that ability to be in any place unseen and think about all the knowledge you could acquire, like what people really thought of you. And you could walk into government buildings and find out kind of top secrets and that sort of thing. I would love to be able to do that. I think it'd be really interesting and probably quite scary as well, to be honest with you.
Next question is, can you tell us a fun fact about yourself, or maybe something you'd think no one else would know?
For about 6 months, I did stand-up comedy. That's something that not a lot of people know. In London, on a barge on the River Thames that had been converted into a kind of a cabaret venue. And I did it for, about 6 months. And it was the most terrifying period of my life and something I would never do again.
And that explains a lot, actually, about the humour in your books, which we'll come on to later. So that's great one. The other thing is, obviously, you're an author, so you're definitely going to be loving books and reading. So where's your favourite place to read?
I really enjoy reading at home and in bed, obviously, all those usual places. But recently I've really enjoyed reading on the trains. So if I'm going somewhere, long journey, reading then I find is the best way of shutting out how annoying other passengers can be on public transport. And I'm talking here about those people who are kind of scrolling through their phones on full volume with music blaring out. Those sorts of people really wind me up. And I find the best way is just to lose myself completely in a story, in a book, and shut out the rest of the deeply annoying world we appear to be living in.
Oh, great answer. That's one of my pet hates as well. So I've always got a book on the train. That's definitely a good way of shutting everything else out. And then lastly, just in this batch of questions, so what's the best thing, would you say, about being an author?
I've always loved telling stories, making up fictional worlds, playing with characters, seeing how they behave, all of that sort of stuff. And I've always enjoyed kind of words as well, and playing with words and working out how to use them to best effect, to tell a story. But I think for me in particular, as a children's and young adult author, actually meeting the readers of the books is probably one of the best things about it, because I do find that kids and teenagers, when they love a book, they really love it. They are passionate about it. I'll meet them at school events and they'll bring me artwork they've made of the characters, or, they'll have made bookmarks or something like that. And they want to talk to me about the stories and what it meant to them as well, And that's just such a wonderful thing. It's a real honour to be part of writing for that age group when they feel like that about your work, and it's something that really, I guess, inspires me to keep me going as well, for sure.
And they also ask some of the best questions, don't they? They ask you things that you're never going to have thought about.
Because I write for all age groups, I get it all. So I have questions from 5-year-olds about what shoes I'm wearing, or the fact they ate an apple yesterday, which isn't obviously actually a question. It's just a statement of fact, but that's fine. Right through to kind of sixth formers who are maybe 16, 17, 18, who have really pertinent questions about, say, censorship or book banning and stuff like that. So it's, you really do get a whole mix. And they're not shy of asking you things like, how much you earn. I've had 9-year-olds asking me what my net worth is. They're quite clued up, and they want to know, what you earn. Is it a good job to have? Can you make a living? So, they're not shy about coming forward.
Now, I promise this next question, I'm not asking you to choose your favourite book that you've written, because that would just be impossible. But I just wondered, for those that might not have discovered your books yet, which one would you recommend them to start with, and why?
I think it partly depends on the age of the reader. So if you're very young and are looking at picture books, you definitely want to start with Llama Glamorama, My Story of a Dancing Llama. If you're maybe sort of between 8 and 12 and looking more at my middle grade novels, I'd perhaps recommend starting with something like Sleepover Takeover, which is just really good fun and a laugh a minute kind of book. So it's, it'll have you hopefully giggling away. And then equally for the young adult stuff, again, if you really want to laugh and get a good handle on my kind of comedy stuff, probably start with my debut, which was Noah Can't Even, which is a story of a sort of very desperately awkward, geeky 15-year-old boy and how his life falls apart after he kisses his best mate at a party. But if you want something a little more serious, maybe, then my last young adult novel, which is Boy Like Me, which is a semi-autobiographical novel about my life growing up in the 90s in rural Lincolnshire, that might be a good place to start. If you want something, a little more serious, perhaps. So I've completely failed to answer your question and say one book, Emma.
What I was most worried about was not getting through all of your books, because I want to talk about all of them. So you've done me a favour there by actually highlighting some of them. That's great. Now, we've already mentioned that this year's National Year of Reading, and we're really looking to inspire others to read more. And, we kind of know you've obviously got a love of reading yourself too. So can I ask, do you remember where it was that you got into reading? So what was it that kind of made you first into a reader? Was it a story, a book, or a person, or an experience, or something else?
My gran was always really into reading. She would always have a book in her hand. And I think seeing an adult that you look up to reading a lot is always going to inspire a young person, a kid, to want to try it as well. And she was a big inspiration to me, both in terms of reading and writing, actually, as well, because that's something she always really encouraged as well. I also had some really great teachers at school, both at primary and secondary, who were really into books, who would, read to us at the end of the school day, for example, in primary school, and who in secondary really kind of encourage us to read lots of different types of books as well. I think for me, it really happened at secondary school, and there were two books in particular, two authors really, which really kind of hit home with me. And the first was when I discovered Agatha Christie and her brilliant murder mysteries. And I'd always been into crime novels and mystery stories, but when I started reading those books, that's when it really clicked, and I absolutely started devouring everything that she'd written. Absolutely loved them, still do. Brilliant books. And then a little bit later, I stumbled across The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, aged 13 3/4, by Sue Townsend. And that was a brilliant moment, because that was the first time I read a book featuring an awkward, geeky teenage boy who felt a lot like me. And the book was also really, really funny as well. So that was where I first realised that books could be hysterical, and that you could also see yourself and your life reflected in the pages of a book, and that could be a wonderful and powerful thing.
Now, you also, so along with the huge back catalogue of books that you've written, you've also teamed up with superstar Olympian Tom Daley and written a book called Jack Splash. Now, just so, I was just wondered, in that process, did you teach him any writing tips at all? And did you learn any tips from him about diving or knitting?
I think Tom would really have his work cut out teaching me anything about diving, let me tell you. No, it was really interesting actually, because I came into that process basically hating all forms of sport because I was, traumatized during PE at school, like a lot of people were, and so I was really quite nervous about it. And certainly, I knew nothing about diving, any of the technical terms, the moves they do. They're not even called moves. So I don't even know what they're called now. It's hopeless. But Tom and I had several meetings where we sat down, and what we did during that process was really talk about the kind of things he wanted to talk about in the book and the themes that were important to him to explore. So things like teamwork in particular is a big part of the Jack Splash story, and how working together as a team, you can put your differences aside and actually go on to create brilliant, wonderful things. And so that was a really big part of that, and kind of friendship and those sorts of things as well were really important to him. So we did a lot of that. And then when it came to actually sort of writing the book, I would typically write a section of it, and it would be a section featuring diving, and I would have to send that over to Tom and just say, look, can you have a look through this? And there's clearly various sections in this where it's very obvious I don't know what I'm talking about. Can you just make it work, or tell me what we need to say, or what the term is, or whatever it might be, and that was really great. So basically, we made up in each other what we perhaps lacked in certain skill or knowledge areas, which worked really, really well. But it was a really fun process, Jack Splash, really good fun to write, and really nice for me to work with him and understand a little bit about his world and the world of diving, basically, and knitting, of course, as well, which also features very strongly in the book.
I love the fact within it as well that it's not all about, kind of winning, is it? It's not about that bit. It's about sort of learning to be better and just kind of, be as good as you can be, but just try.
That's right. I think that the big win in Jack Splash is really about the friendship and the team. There is this whole competition plot running through the whole story, but ultimately it's a story about finding your people and finding friends in unusual and unlikely places. And I think that's something I've tried to explore in a lot of my books, particularly in the middle grade, slightly younger area of the market, is just the fact that sometimes the best friend you're looking for could be right under your nose. It's just you haven't realised that, they're the right person and what they could really mean for you. And I'm always trying to encourage kids to think about that,
Well, that leads me nicely into the next question, actually, because I just wondered, there's so many different themes and issues within your books that the characters sort of are experiencing, and I just like, what do you hope that your readers might take away from reading your books?
I want them to take away a sense of hope, definitely, for their futures, and that's particularly important in my young adult novels because all of those YA titles are LGBTQ plus characters or storylines. And right now, it's a pretty tough time for a lot of LGBTQ plus people. There's a lot of hatred out in the world, unfortunately. And young people, of course, they're well aware of that. They read about it, they see it, they experience it all the time, in their schools, their homes, out in public. So I think it's really important that when they're reading books about those sorts of themes, hopefully they can see themselves in it, and hopefully they can see a way forwards, a hopeful way forwards where things will ultimately be better or work out for them, that happiness is an option for them as much as it is for anybody, that life is full of ups and downs, it is for every single one of us, but that there's a way of kind of navigating that and getting through it, hopefully. So a bit of hope, a bit of resilience, really, really important. I guess the other thing that I've always been really keen on that anyone takes away from the books is just that they find them really entertaining. I really want readers to have a good time with them, and I think when we are kind of having conversations at the moment nationally about the literacy crisis and why people are struggling to read or picking up books or not wanting to, I think it's really important that books are a source of entertainment, and we think of them as much as we do a Netflix show or going to the movies or something like that. And entertainment can look different for different people. It might be a really swoony rom-com. It could be a really exciting thriller. It could be an adventure story. There's lots of different ways entertainment kind of can look. But I think always keeping that in mind is something, I've always tried to make sure that's the ultimate thing that all the books have. Even when they're dealing with quite difficult themes. So, for example, I wrote a middle grade book called Finn Jones Was Here, which deals with grief and death. And it's about a boy called Eric whose best friend Finn has died. And he can't get his head around not having his best mate alongside him any longer. But also, I just think it's one that a lot of readers quite simply enjoy. It's a great way of having a good time with a book. And that's what we want, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And going on from one of your other kind of background sort of careers that you've had as well, you were actually had a background in sort of theatre, and I just wondered if that influenced any of your stories or characters in any of your books too.
It's had a direct effect on some of my books, certainly. So, for example, one of my young adult novels, You're the One That I Want, is all about a school production of Grease that Freddie gets involved with, and he's the most unlikely person to ever be on stage. But he gets involved with it because he likes this other guy who's playing Danny in the show, you know, and quickly kind of finds himself surrounded by sort of backstabbing theatre kids, you know, which is exactly what I found when I got involved in school shows and when I did National Youth Theatre as a teenager as well. So that was really fun to write that, because I took that directly from my own experiences growing up doing Amdram and all the school shows and stuff like that. But I think in terms of like my writing process, I think it's helped a lot working in theatre, actually. And I think it's partly because things like various acting techniques that you would use with actors to develop character, I very much have utilised and adapted in terms of developing characters for the books as well. And similarly, I think it's enabled me to visualize what I'm writing in a very, very clear way. So as a director, you know, you'll get a script, and it very often doesn't have a lot of detail in it, particularly about what's going on or where people are moving. You have to kind of think about that in your own head and decide for yourself how this production looks. That's really helped me when I'm kind of writing and having to visualize a particular scene and who is where.
Now, one of your latest books is called Cold Turkey, and it's published in a dyslexia-friendly format, which is great for some of our members. So did you have to do any research into dyslexia as part of this, or did you have to adapt your writing skills in any way, or maybe learn new skills?
Interestingly, the process is very much, or the process they described it to me, is they just told me to kind of write the book as I would any other book to begin with. Now, obviously, you have like a sort of word count you've got to hit. So often with the dyslexia-friendly titles, they are slightly shorter to make them a bit more accessible and easier for people to pick up and feel like they can read the story without getting bogged down in a really kind of thick book that just seems really daunting, you know. But other than that, you know, it was kind of to write it just as any other book, essentially. And then what happens is it goes through various edits, and it goes through a kind of dyslexia edit, effectively, as well. And that's the kind of moment where the specialist editor will point out any ways in which the vocab you've used, or maybe the sentence structure, could be changed or adapted to make it a bit more accessible for someone with dyslexia, basically. So it might be, you know, it might be the way you compose the sentence length, that type of thing. Making it really clear who is speaking and when is something that quite often gets noted, and you kind of change that as well. And then, of course, the way the book is actually kind of formatted on the page is slightly different as well. So it's kind of a slightly bigger font with more kind of white space on the page, and also it's printed on off-white paper as well, a kind of a creamy coloured paper. So all little ways it can help people with dyslexia to kind of access the text, basically.
Well, and carrying on with the accessible formats, so audiobooks are obviously really important for our members to access reading. So it's really great that a lot of your books are available in audio too. Do you use audiobooks as part of your reading habits at all? And have you listened to your own stories in audio?
I do listen to some of my books that have been done for audio, absolutely. And it's always fascinating. One of the best things I got to do was narrate one of my own books. And they asked me to narrate Boy Like Me, the autobiographical one that I was talking about earlier. And it was a fantastic experience. I got to go to this studio in North London, 3 or 4 days, and I narrated the entire book. And doing that, it really kind of hit me how wonderful an audiobook can be, because you actually get the best of both worlds, especially if you've got the author narrating it, actually, because you not only have the story and the words as you would in a paperback, for example, but you also get that extra bit of interpretation that the person reading it adds in. So it's like an extra layer, I suppose, of storytelling, because there are certain elements of Boy Like Me, that I would deliver in a certain way for that part of the story, with maybe a certain kind of emotion behind it, or sort of sense of the scene, which I guess you wouldn't get, or not necessarily get, if you were reading it in a standard book format, So I think it can be really exciting to to access that and to get that extra layer of storytelling. And equally, if it's an actor, as it usually is, narrating the book. So the rest of my audiobooks are all narrated by various actors. They also bring in that extra layer of something else, their own kind of personal experience or their own interpretation of a particular scene. And very often that can add a whole new element to the story as well, which is just as fantastic and is really, really nice. So actually, for me, the audiobook thing is a lot like, for me, I suppose, working in theatre, which is a lot more of a sort of collaborative medium, in that you've got input from other people other than just the writer, all adding their little elements to the story and making it a whole lot richer in the process.
Well, I can't let you go, Simon, without asking you about what you've got coming up next, because we're all very excited to hear what that might be. And I think you've got another exciting project on the horizon, which is a YA novel coming out next year. Are you able to give us a little sneak peek about that at all?
Yes, it is. It's called Glitterati. It's coming out. Penguin are publishing it in March next year, March 27th. So this is my first young adult thriller. So lots of murder in this one for the first time. It's set on a private island in the Caribbean. And it's about the children, the teenage kids of kind of the global elite billionaires, basically, extraordinarily wealthy. And they go on holiday every year as a kind of tradition to this island and spend a couple of weeks there, kind of meeting up, talking, forging connections, that type of thing. Except one of them this year is a con artist called Tommy, not who he says he is. And he's talked his way onto the island to try and dig up dirt on these rich kids, because he's convinced they're hiding very dark secrets. And indeed they are. But what Tommy ends up unearthing is actually far darker than he anticipated at the very beginning. And it quickly spirals into a very dangerous situation for him as he tries to keep his kind of identity secret and deal with the horrors that he's uncovered on this island. So really exciting, combines a lot of things that I've loved for years, which I've always been fascinated by con artists and the ways in which they psychologically manipulate people to get what they want. I love all that. And there's plenty of that within the book.
Oh, can't wait for that one then. And I noticed as well, did you, you've abbreviated your name for it a little. Is there any reason for that at all? You just, because you're SJ Green, are you, on this one?
Yes, I have. We're publishing this one under S.J. Green rather than Simon James Green, and yeah, the reason for that really is because I've written quite a lot of relatively fun, humorous contemporary titles. We just felt that it'd be good to separate the thrillers and the murder stuff from that a little bit. So ideally, I can sort of do both under almost separate brands, if you like. So Simon James Green will carry on writing kind of fun, funny, humorous stuff, rom-coms and romances and that sort of thing. And S.J. Green, slightly more mysterious because it's abbreviated, will be writing the thrillers and the murder and the death and the blood.
Simon, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope we've managed to, give an overview of as many of your books as possible. We haven't mentioned The Double Life of Ted Amos, so I just have to give a shout out for that because that's one of my faves as well. So please do pick that one up as one of your books when you're discovering Simon. And that I really hope that we've encouraged our listeners to discover more of your books if they haven't yet. If you're a member of Calibre Audio, you can borrow Simon's books from our collection. And if you want to find out more about Simon, then visit his website at simonjamesgreen.com. Simon's books, as I've mentioned, have made me laugh. They've taught me to be brave and try things that are out of my comfort zone. And most importantly, to just be myself. So in the words of the amazing Finn Jones, do it big, do it right, and do it with style. So that only leaves me to say a really big thank you to you, Simon, today for joining us. So thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Emma.